like, yeah. That moment when, the first meal, people are talking, and you hear people, catching up or telling stories, introducing themselves. And then over the course of the conference with each meal, the sound not just gets louder, but changes. And the laughter that starts to dominate. And I love sitting in my bedroom at the back, and I can't hear the conversations, but I can hear the murmur, and I can hear the laughter and laughter and laughter. And it's so beautiful. It's so cool. Like you can hear people become more and more one over the course of the days. And it's been so lovely to hear that from you guys, which is also why it's hard sometimes to say, everybody be quiet, please, because there's this beautiful thing that's happening.
It gets harder to quiet people the longer
Yeah.
it goes too.
Yeah, they take you less and less seriously as well. Yeah. Have you thought when you might want to do a bit of reading? A bit later?
Reading for this?
Decide,
I'm going to open with reading something.
Okay, cool.
But I can do that at your pace.
Yeah, no, okay, no, well, we will follow your lead in that. And we're going to have this session, just a reminder that this session that we're having now is, I get the privilege, because I'm in the chair up here, to ask Pete and Jennifer some questions, and we're going to set them into dialogue with each other, discussion. They're going to share some stuff with us. But this is largely a time for questions for them, with each other, and discussion with them. We are going to invite the lead of each group, if that person's here. If not, maybe quickly tag somebody else. But I think all the leads of each group are here to give like a mini recap of some element of your discussion yesterday, for Pete and Jennifer to hear. But until we move, we're clearly moving to the section of question time. This is a continued listening time, and there will be, then we're going to change our chairs. We're going to move into a groups where we can all see each other and have more questions and discussion at that time. So just to set that up for people to understand, in between then will be the beautiful eating sustenance that we will get. We're going to try to navigate temperature and sounds of things as best as we can in here. Unfortunately, the air conditioner is really loud to have it on, but we'll turn it on again in the break. If anybody's getting too hot. Actually, where are the coolest spots in the room? Like near the fans.
I'm the coolest.
Yeah, so whether now or later, and I'm sorry, I should have said that earlier, just to say, because some people the heat affects more than others. The 3-in-1 of Celia and her twins get far more affected by heat at the moment than Celia has been in the past. So, don't be shy about finding a place that you need, or if you need to step out, and there is water in the hallway, so do not hesitate to step out and grab yourself water. As long as you're not shouting as you do it. We all understand that people are needing to come and go. Is there any other housekeeping things, team, that I should be flagging at this moment? Yeah, no? Are we pretty good? Oh, yes, Brenton has just put himself on the team. Awesome. We're going to hold you to that. Yes, Brenton.
I've got the spiritual gift of satire, sarcasm. So
yeah.
Just if anybody knows about.
Thank you. I did ask Brenton to tell me this.
Yeah. Then I have a couple of questions about keeping the car from exploding. Well, so.
Is there anybody who's got car mechanics experience? Because if not, then I know to just dance in.
This literature.
Okay.
I'm happy to do what I can.
Yeah. Okay. We'll start with Pete.
Would you like us to write you a poem about your car?
We sing it over to
I've got a liturgy for when the car breaks down.
a lot of really great years.
You're on the side of the road. There's that everyday holy.
Okay,
Everybody-
friends. Okay, friends. Okay, we're gonna start with Pete. Afterwards, Pete and Brenton, let me know if it's looking more than that, and I will make some phone calls. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm gonna hit these guys with some questions. Pete and Jennifer. How and they haven't had prep for this, so how is your understanding of what the imagination is? How we employ or access it? How we participate in that wise imagination is the presence of God? That quotation from MacDonald, which I know you both know well. How has your understanding of engaging with, participating in imagination, understanding of imagination changed over time?
I think the thing that first comes into my mind is, like, over time, I think it less change, more mature.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's matured over time. And what I mean by that is, as a young person, I think my understanding of the imagination was just the stuff that you make up in your head. And as an adult and a writer, like, it's more clear to me that the imagination is the way that you enter into an experience that is beyond yourself. So thinking the thoughts of God after him, or what is it like to put yourself in to the story of an African American slave and try to feel what that felt like. All of those things are proper uses of the imagination in my mind.
I think the first thing that comes into my mind is a feeling, and so I'm going to try to put words around it, and I don't know if it'll come out very coherently, but when I was, I need to speak louder. I was a very, very imaginative child and was always making up stories and stuff, but when I went to college and I started reading the Romantic poets, it was actually really the thing that I think first started me thinking about this, and Wordsworth and this transcendent kind of view of beauty and all the things you learn in college and your mind is expanding and all that. And I remember very distinctly as an 18-year-old thinking and writing in my journal that I think I understand now why I want to read the best things that were ever written and see the best art that was ever made. I think that I understand why I want to do that, because the more I am exposed to like the best things that humankind have ever imagined, the bigger that gets in my head, the bigger my wonder at God gets. This is 18-year-old me thinking, because to me it was like the stretching of this big balloon that the most amazing, beautiful, highest things that humanity is capable of imagining and creating pale in comparison to the reality of God. And therefore, the bigger my balloon gets of the more my wonder and worship will get bigger. Does that make sense? And so, I've kind of learned to put more words around that since then. But it has seemed to me over the course of my life that people who have not necessarily had that opportunity or been exposed to like really great art, sometimes it seems like their view of God is more constrained in a box. And that's it. I was talking to a friend of ours who, by her own admission, is not very imaginative, and so things like how to deal with grief and how to think about heaven was just hard for her. And she said, how do I get that bigger view? And I said, I read. This is why I read fantasy. This is why I even science fiction and anything that's expanding that sense of possible reality in your head, whether it's Christian or not, is is exercising that muscle that
Inflating
enables
the
you.
balloon.
It's inflating the balloon, so that it's I that has come naturally to me, and so it's harder for me to articulate it for other people, I think. But
That reminds me of a parallel idea where I can't remember who said it. I can't remember if I heard it in a lecture or read it in a book. But somebody was talking about how when we say that God is a mystery, that can be confusing to some people because our experience of that word often is like, what are you reading? A mystery novel. So is a mystery a thing that you figure out? You know, is a thing you follow the clues and, you know, assemble the picture on? And the point was that God is not that kind of mystery. God is a mystery in that the knowledge of God is inexhaustible. Like you can proceed further into the knowledge and imagination of God for eternity, and there will never be less of it. Like, so we will continue exploring the mysteries of God forever.
yeah,
And that's a big balloon.
yeah. It's not a mystery that says, well, no more thinking. It's a
Right.
mystery that's always inviting you further.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to read a couple McDonald quotations, of course. I was actually going to try to print them out for everybody, but we've had a challenging printer situation, like at every Linlathen. So we actually bought a brand new one this year, and we're still having challenges. So I'm going to read some familiar George words, familiar to you two, but I think dive deeply into some places you've taken us, and then ask you to respond to it. So, no one could sing as they have sung, had others not sung before them. Deep answereth unto deep, face to face, praise to praise. To the sound of the trumpet, the harp returns its own vibrating response, alike, but oh, how different. That quotation is from England's Antiphon. Next to possessing a true, wise, and victorious friend seated by your fireside, it is blessed to have the spirit of such a friend embodied, for spirit can assume any embodiment, on your bookshelves. But in the latter case, the friendship is all on one side. For full friendship, your friend must love you and know that you love him. So it's different, McDonald's saying. It's different than the person beside you. And he will always tell you that the person in flesh is more important than the friend on the shelf for the moment while we're here. But surely these biographies, surely these stories are not merely spiritual links connecting us in the truest manner with past times and vanished minds, and thus producing strong half-friendships. Are they not likewise links connecting us with a future, wherein these souls shall dawn upon ours, rising again from the death of the past into the life of our knowledge and love? Are not these biographies letters of introduction, forwarded but not yet followed by the person they introduce? We will be with Lilius someday, for whose steps we listen and whose voice we long to hear, and whom we shall yet meet somewhere in the capital I infinite. And really in there, I think there's so many ways, and for obvious reasons, summed up some of what you guys have been reminding us of again and again, that the long conversation of which we are a part, that story in which our chapter is happening, but part of a greater story, the clouds of witnesses, as Rebecca so beautifully put it last night, the giants upon the shoulders of giants upon the shoulders of giants, that we're friends and fellows in the same story still. So can you guys leap off?
Well, you
of
should have
George's
just
list
led with
there?
that on Friday, and then we could have cut right to just the eating and the.
And just ate all weekend.
That summed up your talk pretty well.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. I don't know what I've got to add to that other than well done, George. That's
Where
what
does that
I
take
was
your
gonna
brain?
say.
Yeah, where does that take you?
I mean, the thing that he says about the harp answering the trumpet or whatever
Yeah,
it
the
was.
trumpet.
I mean, it's exactly what I've been talking about. You know, like it's hard to make music alone. You know, we're always in conversation and reflecting and resonating other things, and the more things that we're aware of in the orchestra that we can resonate with, the richer the sound is. Which is a great argument for the expansion of your balloon. How's that for a mixed set of metaphors? But I think that makes sense.
I'm trying to find a quote really quickly, and then it's
Is that your way of saying keep talking, Pete?
yes.
Yeah.
Just a second, I'm trying to find it. Keep talking.
I have run out of words.
Oh, no.
But I love the idea of the companionship that Jennifer talks about and that he just drew out of. And that's, you know, I think I mentioned a couple times over the weekend that, you know, when I sit down to write something, like, it would terrify me to think that I'm attempting this alone. Like, I need to know who are my companions on the journey. Like, so is it Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or Gerard Manley Hopkins or C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien? Like, who am I going to use to resonate, to give this thing that I'm working on some fuller sound than my own voice? But then the paradox of that is that when you're collaborating with over time, or borrowing, or dare I say stealing from other people, like, it could sound like you're just mimicking or cheating, but the reality is that the more you do it, the more it makes your voice unique. And that's a paradox that is a mystery to me. But it's plainly obvious that when I sit down to write, I can hear my voice in it because I hear my entire cauldron of soup bubbling behind me. If that makes sense. Yeah.
And so Pete has talked a lot about that in a literary sense or an artistic sense, how we're building upon the past. And Lily talks about that from a spiritual sense, and that's what it made me think of. So you remember when Pete was talking about the Camino yesterday and the Cruz de Ferro and all of the stones that had ground down, like the stones of the pilgrims from centuries before, ground down into dust underneath the others, and you have this kind of the dust of all the previous pilgrims who are there with you. So Lily, who was always finding, you know, parables and everything, she was inspired one day by the coal, the idea of coal. You know, the coal is the organic matter that has become now fuel. And she was thinking about how the church in Algeria was one of the oldest churches. You know, like this is the church of Augustine, you know, and there were the ruins everywhere of that early church that had then been swept away in the 7th century by the Arab invasions. But there were places, you know, as they traveled, there were places where she felt the spirit was still somehow present, and that there were glimmers of you know, curiosity and interest and things there she felt like that had already been planted even before she was
Composted.
there. Compost, yeah. So she says, like the coal supply that fueled so much of the world's commerce at the time. She says, the bringing to the surface of the buried lives of the trees and plants of ages far away. And perhaps God uses the stored up sun rays of our own lives and prayers long after we are gone in ways we cannot even dream of. Sometimes I wonder, she reflected, whether some such story lies behind the persistent feeling of light and heat from Tozeur, that was one of the cities in Tunisia that where they felt this. It has nothing to do with us. We felt the Spirit's power there before we ever entered a word. And now Ali and Omar, two of the Sufis from there, tell us that there were Christians there long ago, in the Roman days. And it may be just the pent-up prayers of centuries that is breaking into flame now. And so that she had met in one of her journeys this Welsh revivalist, Evan Roberts. And he said to her, he gave her a very enigmatic challenge at the time. He said, you must not be limited to Algiers. God wants you for the whole church and for the whole world. And she never really unpacked that in terms of her. I mean, she wasn't thinking about her own importance, but she thought a lot about how this idea of how Christians throughout history have borne fruit or planted seeds that will last and, and God may use far beyond their own times. And she said, God may use by reason of the wonderful solidarity of his church the things that he has wrought in us for the blessing of souls unknown to us, as these twigs and leaves of bygone years whose individuality is forgotten pass on vitality still to the newborn wood sorrel. God only knows the endless possibilities that lie folded in each one of us. That's what I think is beautiful.
Thank you. Well, why don't we go from there to if each of the team sort of designated group persons who had no idea I was going to do this to them, but if you guys could share something general or specific, but something out of yesterday's discussion time, now, so that Pete and Jennifer can hear that, and that'll be floating, and then they're gonna, take this into their discussion of the Camino, however that flows out. But if you could do that now, and go ahead and volunteer, so I don't have to remember and find you if you can, or I can call you out.
I can share.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca.
Because I'm not actually going to share too many details because we actually had a beautiful, vulnerable time that was facilitated by our discussions. So here's what I can share is that for a lot of us, the journey to even get here felt like a journey to a wild and far off place.
Mm.
And our discussion revealed that a lot of us are in a wilderness, and we are on the threshold, or we are stepping into change. And so coming into this wild and far off place, hearing stories of people who answered the call and answered it well, and answered it in a way that we can trace their journeys, their growth. It has given us courage and water for our souls. So that is what I can share without ratting anyone out.
Thank you, Rebecca.
If anyone in my group thinks there should be more added, please do. Okay.
No, that's great. Nathan, I'm looking Nathan in.
Yeah. It's hard for me to summarize everything.
Yeah, you can
in
just
our
pull
group,
out
but
something.
like we had a number of playwrights in our group.
Oh, wow, cool.
And so it was interesting to hear their reflections about how to take a novel or something in a written format for the play or for the radio or for different age groups.
Yeah.
And how that creative process works and how the markers may evolve or change throughout that process. I'm not sure if others have more to add.
No, that's really cool. Thank you. I love the diversity of conversations. And did you repeat it?
I'd really like anybody else from Team 1 to jump in. Because I actually can't recall, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. My brain does the blank thing all the time. So somebody else from Anne's group?
I
Thanks,
remember
Karen.
we talked a bit about the cauldron idea. Especially for early in an amateur process, how does you distinguish just like plagiarism? Like if we haven't read as many sources, then it might be weaker and more stealing, but the more sources you have, just the synthesis on its own is a valuable like shoulder standing, I guess. I think we talked about a couple other things, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, our group sort of talked along the same lines about where the line is between like just sort of plagiarizing and using something like beautifully and uniquely in a fresh way. And then we sort of talked a little bit about the sort of classical corpus as well, and the fact that compared to say like 1900 England, we have a much more diverse society with more diverse sources, which is a beautiful thing. But it also means that we don't always have the same reference points. So sort of like how to think about that and approach that, and what that means for the creative process. And I don't think we really came to a conclusion other than that desire to learn is good and curiosity is good, and we should try to spark that in everybody, no matter what we're writing.
Cool.
Janisa.
Yeah, so a lot of them were not involved in the session, so they were sort of on the peripheries observing what was going on in the conversation. But I guess like 3 or 2 things that were kind of like main topics of the conversation. We talked a little bit about vocation and calling and sort of I guess reflecting a little bit on Lilia's Trotter's life and how she integrated her art with what she was doing for vocation, or that was part of her vocation. So for a lot of the team, that was something that they thought about in coming back and sort of like being part of Linlathen and seeing that as sort of like a reminder of who they are, like in being in the careers that they are, but then also having like the creative side. So that was really cool. To have like a familiar space or place to come back to the art. And then another thing we were reflecting on was finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. So even like on our nature walk, standing around in a circle and looking at a patch of grass and seeing all the different like beautiful things.
Thank you. Emily, did you have a group?
Already gone.
Oh. Thank you, Evelyn.
I might need some help. We talked in part about different, whether the far and wild places, far off and wild places in our own lives, and for some, who are less creative, who are very creative people, but are finding themselves in less creative venues for work. How does that work? And just kind of talking that a bit, and kind of what are some of the next far off places that we feel called to go to and be. That was part of our conversation. Anyone else from the group?
Well, one of my takeaways I'll add is that this notion of one hand in the past, rooted in the conversation that's coming along, one hand reaching forward into the mystery of the future. That doesn't just apply to creative writing on the side, it actually applies to my professional life too. If I'm in a policy house or I'm doing technical work, it's the same posture. And that actually somehow hadn't occurred to me in the session itself. But the discussion will help me to understand.
Am I missing a group? Is that all? I think that's all the groups. Shout out if your group hasn't been represented. No, I think that is all the groups. So can you guys take those things, hold those things, and take us forward?
So yeah, I think that the whole story of the Camino ties together so much of this stuff in so many interesting ways. And I think I'm just going to trust what we've got to talk about to do that work. And I think y'all will see the connections as we work through it.
Yeah, cool.
And then we can talk further in the second session.
Yeah.
It's very specific.
Yeah. So I'm going to start.
I'm just going to ask quickly. It seems to me every time the door, can we practice it? When the door opens, I feel a breeze coming through here. Can we experiment to see if other people do too? If having the door open actually pulls air through? Chris, could you experiment just holding the door open there for a bit and pause and feel the room for a few seconds? Can you guys feel a pull of air, or was that just me? Yeah. So is that better? Yeah. I think that's better. Thank you.
Chris, could you give me a cup of water?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Um,
Would you like some water?
Oh yeah, sure. You bet. Okay, so rumors of the Holy City. So one of the things, well, I'm going to start by reading this, and I had this brilliant idea when we started walking the Camino that I was going to take a journal and write about the experience all the way through. So this is literally titled Mile Zero, I'm going to read it. It's fairly short. And then there's a couple others I'm going to read. And then the journals are going to stop. And I'll talk a little bit about why that happens and how I feel about that here in a few minutes. So this is mile 0. We arrived in Saint Jean Pied de Port, France today. We're staying at the Bellari Hostel. Bellari is Basque for pilgrim. And I'm writing from a, quote, meditation room on the rock terrace behind the hostel. It's a little stone room about 6 feet by 8 feet that feels like a shrine to everything or nothing, depending on how you look at it. It's pseudo-religious, as if it wants to be a meaningful place, but in navigating itself around any particular faith, it's become something of a no place, a place of all faiths, and therefore none. There are sconces in the walls filled with a shell, a sacred-looking vial of perfume, with a brand sticker still on it, something French, of course. There's a tea light candle, which I've lit, a couple of angelic figures, a Sedona, Arizona-style crystal, and several other assorted trinkets. There are 2 rosaries strung up, and a couple of large flat stones set in the center of the room, just asking to be knelt upon in prayer. Maybe I'm just being cynical, but I'm bothered by the world's readiness to become a no place instead of a some place or a one place. I'd rather visit a Buddhist shrine than one that makes no risk at all towards something grander than mediocrity. But that's just the room I'm in, and to be honest, it is a good place to write. We've only just arrived, and I've had a couple of pre-Camino days in Spain and France, but I've already gathered an overwhelming feeling of helplessness, of displacement and weariness that amounts to a unique humility. The first, because I cannot communicate well here. We studied our Spanish every night before leaving, a whopping 53-day streak on Duolingo. And I swear I felt confident in it when we boarded the plane, but whatever false confidence I had accumulated via our iPhone teacher melted away in a hurry the first time I walked into a cafe and tried to order coffee. Quiero una taza de café, I said, and the waitress, the camarera, gave me a polite nod and then said something completely baffling and looked at me inquisitively. I still have no idea what she said, but I got my café con leche and enjoyed it anyway. And that fairly describes every interaction since getting here. I feel like I know so many words, but no one else seems to be using any of them. Therefore, helplessness. As someone who generally moves through the world with confidence, this is uncomfortable and frankly oddly refreshing to find myself having to rely on the kindness and understanding of others, even to order coffee. As for displacement, well, that's obvious. We don't belong here. But it's a displacement beyond that of merely traveling to an unknown place. It's a displacement that's peculiar to being a pilgrim. We walk everywhere, with everything, and we have to rely on what we find along the way to sustain us. I don't want to romanticize the situation of a refugee, but there is a similarity in situation, if not in measure or seriousness. It's a state of being in between, of being en route. Our homelessness is by choice, of course, and not out of necessity, but the rub is still there, and you feel it in every stranger's glance. My weariness explains itself by virtue of the other 2, displacement and helplessness. And when all 3 are taken together, they amount to a real sense of joy when encountering another human who's kind and helpful and understands what it is you need. In light of that, I find myself wondering how I am to go about being Christ in my small ways to the people I meet. And I'm realizing that maybe I can't. Maybe that's not my place right now. Maybe all I can do is reflect back the Christ that they are being to me. To wit, immediately after writing that last paragraph, we went down for dinner. We joined 19 other pilgrims, our 2 hosts, who had been cooking for hours. Joseph, a Basque Frenchman in whose home we were sheltered, had assembled us all around a single table. The room was small and the table filled most of it. There wasn't much, if anything, in the form of elbow room. And once we were all seated, he polled the room for names and nationalities. 3 French, 2 Swiss, 6 American, 5 German, 2 Brazilian, 1 Canadian. Between us, we almost had a shared language. But Joseph ended up needing to translate everything into either English or French. Most remarkable of all, though, were Laurie and Russell, a couple in their 60s, both blind. Yes, you read that right, or heard that right, blind. A married couple walking 500 miles across mountains, deserts, cities, and rivers, and the length of all of Spain itself, without the benefit of sight. And get this, it's their second Camino. Talk about humility. Both of them smiled from ear to ear for the whole meal. We passed around the wine and toasted one another as our, quote, one-night family. That's what Joseph called us. Then followed a homemade lentil soup for an appetizer and fresh bread, then salad with fresh mixed balsamic dressing and vibrantly colored slaw with eggs. And after that, Joseph brought the main course to our table and asked if I would serve. I would. It was a vegetable entree of carrots and mushrooms and other delicious things atop steamed rice. I stood and served, and each person watched as I loaded up their plate and motioned when the portion was just right. So when Russell's plate came around, I realized he couldn't see the portion size, and I called aloud to him, "Russell, are you a little bit hungry or a lot hungry?" And Reinhardt, a big German man seated next to him, cried out, "Such a man is very hungry!" And so it was. May we all be such men as Russell. He had light in his eyes. When dinner had concluded with a picture, right here, we were tired to rest for the day ahead. I'm grateful for each of the members of that one-night family. No matter how ragged and scattered a remnant of humankind we are, we assemble, perhaps, in search of a something, a one thing. We resist the pull toward becoming a no thing. And a sacred presence shines through us each, calls us on toward one another, toward itself, toward himself. Even the Sedona-style crystal on the meditation room shelf glimmered with the brilliance of its maker. Even the blind shine forth in light. To these gathered together, I say, merci beaucoup, danke ser, muchas gracias, muito obrigado. Thank you. Thank you for allowing Christ to play in 18 of his 10,000 places around our table. Tomorrow, we will climb the Pyrenees. So, Jennifer.
Well, we're not gonna. Don't worry. We're not gonna be like doing our vacation photos for you today. We are gonna show some of the pictures, but we wanted to talk about some of the themes that arose out of this for us, because this trip, Pete told you a little bit about the background of what happened right before. We also came home from this to another crisis. This trip was, in so many ways, a kind of a hinge in our life, and it has come to symbolize a lot of things for us, and things that I'm still unpacking. And so afterwards, I made a list of some of those, some words that encapsulated what was most important about this for me. One of them was story, because we found out very soon that the Camino itself is a walkable story. It's a walkable novel, even in its landscape. It's really unintended, but beautiful in how this works out. So it's a 3-act story, and we're going to talk about a little bit about each of those acts, as well as some of the other themes that arose to the surface for us. So Act one.
Do you
The
guys
challenge.
should we? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Does everybody understand what we mean when we say a 3-act story? Is that
Go ahead and unpack.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
unpack the.
Well,
yeah.
traditional storytelling, I would argue all storytelling, but obviously you can frustrate expectations. But a story generally is 3 acts. The first act is the call to adventure. It involves a character having something that sets him off onto the journey or into the story. Act 2 is the struggle. Like, once the character has set off into the story, there is a series of frustrations and accomplishments that go back and forth and result in, the conflict of the story. And then Act 3, once normally the character will reach its lowest point and then change. And then Act 3 involves the resolution of all of that conflict and the revelation of how the character is now different.
And each of those acts, like the transition from one act to another, involves a turn. And so usually the end of Act 1 is the turn of a decision point. Which just, I can't believe how much our journey followed this. So, you know, the call to adventure and like, yes, I'm excited, but also, you know, usually there's a little moment where the character has to say, yes, I am going to do this. Yes, I am going to go this direction. And that's usually the turn that then really thrusts you into the heart of the adventure in Act 2. And then, as he said, Act 2 ends at the dark night of the soul, the low point. And the turn is that eucatastrophe in Tolkien, of that moment of hope, glimpse beyond the edge of the world, the ends of the world, that then takes you into Act 3 and the climax. And so just keep that in mind as we're going through. So Act 1 is the challenge of the body. Go to the first line. Okay, so you spend a lot of time packing, repacking, trying to figure out, you know, what you're going to take, practicing, training. Is this just yours, or is this both? This is yours, both? That's right? Just mine. Okay, so that is everything I took for 6 weeks in my pack. And I thought, we trained, I thought I had gotten that down to the least amount of things I possibly could. Within 2 days, I was already throwing stuff away. Mine weighed, what, 5-6 pounds?
No, it was about 13 to 15
13 to 15 pounds. His was a little bit more. But all of these little things, they weigh so little before you've left. They're so light, you know? But all these little ounces are things that are going to be weighing you down. And, you know, no matter how much you train, you have not trained for walking 15 to 20 miles a day for days and days and days and days and days.
In fact, there's
no idea what it's
a lot of people will say, how do you train? And I think even though we did train, the real answer is don't bother. Like the Camino will train you, and there's nothing you can do to make it easier.
Yeah. Even people who are runners, like, this is different from anything you've ever done to your body. And so the first act, when you're going across the Pyrenees, so like within hours of when you're starting, you're going straight up a mountain, you know, and over the Pyrenees, and then the descent is even harder than going
on your knees.
It's awful going down, and like there are people who don't make it beyond those first 2 days. And so that first act, that first challenge of the body, which is really training you to do the rest of the pilgrimage, it's hard, and it's you are blistered and bloody and exhausted immediately, and already at the beginning you're casting off some things. So what is the next picture that we've got? Okay, so the Pyrenees.
Great
supposedly, you know, you've finally made it up to the top. Supposedly, this is like the best views of the entire Camino. You can supposedly see Spain from here. So you start in France. We started in France. You go across the border and you see Spain spread out in front of you, except.
And it's freezing, and it's raining, and it's cold.
So this was our first 2 days, first day on the Camino, going over the Pyrenees. And as I said, I had brought Lily with me, and I wanted to figure out how to see like Lily. I'm going to start collecting parables. And right away, I'm walking through this. I can't see anything. And I realized in the middle of that, well, this was my first parable trip. We had just met a blind couple, walking the Camino for the second time, happy as a clam. And they knew they were surrounded by beauty that they couldn't see. There was one spot when we got through this, we were walking with them for a while, and it was a beautiful, like, field of flowers, and everyone was stopping to take pictures. And Russell and his wife, Lori, said, "Can you take a picture of us?" And so we positioned them in front of this gorgeous scenery, and we took a picture with them. and they couldn't see it, but they knew there was beauty around them, and they were so happy. And so I'm walking through this mist on my first day and thinking, like, this is my first parable of the trip. I am surrounded by beauty, and I can't see it, but I know it's there. Like, I have been told that on the other side of that mist there's Spain. And how much have I walked through my life exactly like this, where there is beauty, both physical beauty, literal beauty around me, but there's also this spiritual reality that is enveloping me all the time, and I don't see it. I'm walking through this mist all the time. And it reminded me of the Horse and His Boy, when Sasha is Shasta is walking along the edge of the cliff, and Aslan is beside him. In the story, he can see Aslan, but he can't see the side of the cliff. It's like, it's kind of the reverse for me, where I'm always walking on the side of the cliff, and I see that cliff. I don't see Aslan walking beside me the whole time. And so that was my first practice of going through, the learning to see the way that Lily saw. This is my shoes after 2 days, and they only got worse from there. But this is still going through.
Descent into Roncesvalles.
Okay, so the descent into Roncesvalles, which is almost harder than the ascent.
And we got lost.
We got lost.
In the mist. We missed the signpost.
In the Pyrenees.
And, well, the funny thing is, we're like, man, this feels so much longer than like the 20 kilometers it's supposed to be.
And nobody else is around us.
And it turned out it felt longer because it was.
It's resulted in really beautiful photography.
Yeah.
Finally, we saw another pilgrim who over there, and we kind of followed him. We got back on the trail, but we ended up walking longer than we need to. So things could have turned very bad, but we did get back.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So you want me to read?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so we eventually did make it to our. This is when the clouds finally cleared, and we got to see a little bit of the view from the Pyrenees. And then this is in Roncesvalles, Spain. This is a very famous place to take a picture that gives you an inkling of what you've got in store. 790 kilometers ahead of you. So this is mile 18. We made it across the Pyrenees, and we did it all in a cloud. Here and there we got hints of the heights we'd attained, but for most part, it was an eerie wonderland of mist and trees and the ringing bells of wandering horses. After getting lost in the fog and bumbling an unneeded 4 kilometers to find our way, we descended into the tiny town of Roncesvalles and spent the night in the ancient pilgrim hostel there, with hundreds of other weary travelers. Before bed, we attended Mass at the adjoining church. The service was in Spanish, and we stumbled our way through the liturgy, not always sure when to stand or sit, but catching refreshing hints of familiarity when hearing and recognizing the creed, or names like Pedro, Peter, or Pablo, Paul. Tired and foot-worn, my mind wandered, and it wasn't long before I found myself getting unexpectedly emotional. I was sitting in a chapel older than my country by centuries, and the words of the gospel were spilling over me in a tongue not my own. I marveled that for all these quiet hundreds of years in a Spanish wood, shrouded in mist and trodden by legions of peregrinos, from every imaginable walk of life and nation and tongue, the gospel is preached each night over whomever will come. And then the pews were filled with those who came. Whether we saw or whether we who gather understood the liturgy or not is ultimately irrelevant. After all, even in my own tongue, the Eucharist is a mystery. The added distance of a language puts it no further from my comprehension than it is on a Sunday in my own home church. I do here as I do at home. I assent to the holy mystery, and it envelops me, even in my ignorance. Praise God. At the end of the Mass, the priest came down from the dais and asked everyone who was a pilgrim to gather around him. He called us all out by our nations: Spain, England, Germany, France, the United States, Canada, Hungary, Korea, China, Sweden, Switzerland, Poland, Ukraine, Mexico, Brazil, so many more. There was kindness and laughter in him as he struggled to encompass us all. Dozens had converged from all over the globe, some in search of adventure, some looking for enlightenment, some come for quiet or companionship or health or grief or 100 other reasons. Yet here we converge in our ignorance, and in mystery the priest blesses us with a smile. People have sometimes asked me what I hope to get out of walking the Camino. That word, by the way, means the way of St. James, and the layers of its meaning are still expanding before me as I walk its many paths. But I've tended to be evasive when the question comes. I'm just here to walk, I say. I'm open to something more, but I don't want to expect anything more than some quiet and some scenery. Receiving the priest's blessing that second night, though, would be my first clue that the way is so much more than a walk. And the form of that clue was a vision of the church that opened up before me and suggested that her quiet work in the world goes on in loveliness and humility. Even when I'm tempted to fear, it's drowned out by furor, scandal, and misuse. Is this smiling priest not an icon of the Christ? The world comes before him in ignorance. Some believe, many may not. Yet communion is offered. Yes, even in this Catholic Mass, for who can parse us? And all are blessed. We have only to come to stretch out our hands. What is the work of the church if not to offer the world back to God, even in its brokenness, its unreadiness, its rags, its smells, its blistered feet, its limping legs? We offer it back to God, and the rest perhaps is not our business. We slept soundly, we woke early, and on the road ahead the clouds began to clear. A blessed green country spread out before us like a gift. This is the way, and I was only beginning to understand. So do you want to talk about that?
So this is, briefly, and then I'll hand it back to you. But, so this is the challenge of the body, the Act 1. And, you know, in so many ways, every physical challenge that could be thrown at you, you're exhausted already. You're got blisters on your feet. And as we were going down one of these hills, it wasn't even a steep part. It was some loose gravel, and I face planted, top heavy with this backpack, landed on my thigh, my shin, on a rock. And did you write about that part? Okay, I'm gonna pass that on to you. Then you can tell the rest of it.
Okay, so I don't think I covered this picture in what I wrote, though.
Oh, okay.
So just I'm gonna read about her injury and what happened afterward. But she hurt her leg,
Yeah.
and then ultimately the day we were walking into Pamplona, she just couldn't carry her back anymore.
It was getting worse and worse and worse.
She was
until
hobbling.
I could not walk anymore.
So I had to take and carry her pack and my pack, which I was unhappy about.
Good husband. All right.
But I managed to smile in this picture. Yeah. Anyway, we made it to Pamplona. So the path to Zubiri, Spain from Roncesvalles wasn't a hard one. It meandered through a lovely countryside filled with spring colors. We felt like after crossing the Pyrenees, it was bound to be all downhill from there, and metaphorically speaking. And for the first few hours, that's exactly how it seemed. We'd left the mist and the cold of the mountains behind, the sun was out, the colors were bright, the miles were easy. Over the course of the day, Jennifer, after she fell, her shin got tighter and tighter, more and more uncomfortable. We hoped rest would help it, but the next day, as we made for Pamplona, the pain grew to the point that she could barely walk. So I took her backpack and carried it, and gave her enough mobility to limp into the city at a hobble. I was worried about her leg, but Jennifer was mad. Mad. Imagine her rage at having trained for a year only to slip on a silly little rock 3 days in, and to find your entire Camino endangered because of it. Mad is the right emotion. I suggested that we get a room in Pamplona and stay for a couple of days to let the leg rest, and she begrudgingly agreed. So right now you're probably thinking that 2 days in Pamplona doesn't sound like a bad way to convalesce. And you're right, it sounds peachy, until you consider that resting a leg means being stuck in a hotel room knowing that Pamplona is out there, not being enjoyed, at least not by you. It was a low point, and Jennifer did a lot of growling and punching pillows. Her righteous anger was not going away, and to make it worse, by stopping for 2 days, all of the good folks that we had met at Bellari were getting on ahead of us. We were losing our people. It felt like we'd only just left the starting gate and already the race was up. After 2 days, the pain had abated somewhat, but she still wasn't able to walk well, so we had to make a hard choice. Stopping our trip was not an option. Stopping short of Santiago was not an option. No matter what, we needed to keep moving forward, so we elected to jump on the bus in Pamplona and make up the time we had lost while resting. Then we'd shorten our days and walk only as far as her leg would allow. And we'd hope it improved with time and use. We hated it, but it seemed the best option, and it would allow us to catch up with our people. So as we got on the bus, watching the way streak passed from the window left us feeling like we had failed in some way. It was a sad day. But, lo and behold, soon after getting back on the Camino, we began to see familiar faces, and we were encouraged. The unexpected turn was this. Because Jennifer couldn't yet manage the 20 to 28 kilometers a day prescribed by the guidebooks, we ended up staying in smaller off-route towns and villages and cozier family-run albergues. And in those tiny, ancient stone rock places, we discovered the real beauty of the Camino, a beauty we would have missed otherwise. We came one day to the tiny hamlet of Villamayor de Monjardin. The place was built in the shadow of the tallest nearby mount, and upon its peak stood the ruin of a medieval castle. As we approached our albergue, we immediately noticed how different it was. The volunteers running it were out in front, greeting pilgrims kindly, even though they weren't yet open for check-in. They had tables and chairs set out for us to relax in while we waited, and they eagerly directed us to the cafe next door if we needed refreshment. There was an immediate and apparent hospitality about the place. We felt welcome. We felt cared for. And even more intriguing was a sign on the wall inviting us to a, quote, Jesus meditation after dinner. This place was different from the municipal albergue of Pamplona or the vast pilgrim hostel of Roncesvalles, and we were intrigued. That night, we joined 20 or so pilgrims of the Oasis Trails for dinner, a home-cooked slice of hospitality in the form of soup and spaghetti, wine and bread, all glorious. We enjoyed a conversation in several languages as we tried to get to know everyone around us. We especially enjoyed meeting 2 German women who we would see again and again from time to time along the road in the weeks to come. And miracle of miracles, one young woman at the table, Rupa, who had arrived that very afternoon from Australia, asked, "Are you Pete and Jennifer from the Rabbit Room?" It turns out she's a fellow rabbit, and this was her first day working as a volunteer at the albergue. What are the chances? After dinner, we were invited to join in the Jesus meditation. It was held in an old stable that had been transformed by oriental rugs and mountains of pillows into a sort of chapel area in which we all sat on the floor. The feeling was undeniably first-century Palestine. And I found myself thinking that this might have been what the upper room was like. Everyone on the floor, reclined on pillows, all facing one another across the room. I found myself thinking, after the hated bus out of Pamplona, that surely in some strange way this is all the Holy Spirit's direction. And here in this stable I'd get my confirmation. I left for Spain in the midst of the Nashville production of the Hiding Place play. The timing was awful in more ways than I care to count. I was needed at home. That was the work I was called to. And skipping town to gallivant around Spain for 6 weeks felt like playing hooky. But here I was, sitting on the floor of a stable in the shadow of a castle, and of all things, an elderly Dutch woman, like Betsy ten Boom herself, began to read the Bible to me. She began with very little in the way of an introduction, and in her thick Dutch accent read in English, "Come to me, all who are carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest." It seemed the Spirit had ushered the Ten Booms out of eternity to speak to me, and I listened. She read several passages to us, Lectio Divina style, lingering over each phrase to let it settle in the cool of the evening. and then reading it again and again. I knew from the conversations at dinner that of the 15 or 20 people participating in the meditation, it was probable that only a few of them were believers. But among us was no hint of awkwardness or discomfort. These folks had all walked long in the heat of the day, had been ministered to with food and drink and kindness, and now, no matter what they believed or didn't believe, they each condescended to rest in the poetry and mystery of Scripture and Christ's offer to take up their loads. When the reading was over, our host asked if anyone would like to talk about their Camino or anything else that was on their minds. And we did. Almost everyone risked opening up about something. I confessed our frustrations about Jennifer's injury, but also the enormous blessing that we felt at having stumbled into such a place. I couldn't stop thinking about how we hadn't planned to be there, and how Rupa had arrived at the exact same time, and how, amid my anxiety about the hiding place, I'd find myself sitting at the foot of a Dutch woman. Could there be any doubt that we had found ourselves exactly where we were supposed to be? Only the Holy Spirit knows for sure. Before we wrapped up the evening, one of the hospitaleros told us why he was there. I've forgotten most of the personal details, but he ended by telling us something I'll never forget. He told us that as a Christian, he understood that he was supposed to carry the gospel to the world, but he didn't know how. He said, quote, "I prayed and I asked, how am I supposed to do that, Lord? And the Holy Spirit told me, go to Spain. I will bring the world to you." And here we were. Praise God. And then he laid his hands on Jennifer's leg and prayed over us. 2 days later, Jennifer walked 20 kilometers, and we were on our way.
Oh. Turn of Act 1 into Act 2. This one will go much faster. So Act 2, you're past Pamplona, and you're into the Meseta. And this is what you look at for the next 2 weeks. Just long, long, long stretch of road. Primarily flat plains. This is actually a pretty green looking one. Yeah. A lot of the Meseta doesn't look like it.
It's also discouraging because you can see where you're going and you never seem to get there.
Yes. and so, you know, the challenge of the body has subsided. You've gotten into your rhythm. You've learned how to treat your blisters. You've over the worst of it. But you've also.
Sorry, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
I keep interrupting you.
Yeah.
Can I meant to say,
Yeah.
that's the last of my journal entries.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this until yesterday. I was going over all this and I was like, dang it, I really enjoy these. I've forgotten so many of these details. I wish I had kept writing. And I realized as I was lamenting that what actually happened was I realized that I was paying, like, I'm glad I paid attention to that stuff. But what I really needed to do was stop being a writer and to just walk. And so from this point on, there is no more writing for me. It was me actually finally losing myself into the experience of just the physicality of everything that we were doing.
Yeah.
Which I think is right and proper.
Yeah. I threw out my journal on day 2.
Because it was heavy.
I mean, the second day, I'm like, what do I I don't need a towel. We can share a towel. Like, oh my gosh, so my journal went in the trash. So the Meseta, so lots of people come, to the Camino because they're in between things. They're in transition. They're in a crisis in their life. They just know they need some space away. And by this time, the adrenaline has kind of, worn off, the excitement, the scenery, and you are just day after day with this flat road ahead of you. And so Act 2 of the story is the challenge of the mind, the mental challenge, where, we're used to distracting ourselves all the time in our ordinary lives, and you have no distraction. You are stuck with your own self for a long way. And this is
and your own pain.
And your own pain and your own whatever crisis brought to you to this point. you know, there are other people beside you, and you have, you know, sometimes you walk with people, sometimes you don't, but pretty much it's you and yourself in a lot of space. And that's really, really hard for some people. It was glorious to me because I'm an introvert, but also it was that second word, the S word in my mind was space, story, like simplicity in terms of the backpack, but space. And I had like so much space, physical space around me, and also internal space that I'd never had. And I had space for joy. I had space to, you know, work through all the junk inside. But I told you that I was taking with me several companions on this journey. Lilius was one of them. George MacDonald was one of them. Another one was Julian of Norwich. She was one of my companions on the Camino. I had not read her before the Camino. I took her on my Kindle. And I was reading Julian of Norwich, who is, if you don't know, was a 14th century English medieval mystic and anchorite, which means at that point in time, as a woman, you could choose to kind of attach yourself to a church. You took a vow to that little church, and they boxed you into a room. They put you in a little room attached to the church with windows through which people would feed you, and a window through which you would receive the communion. And then your vocation was to pray for that parish for the rest of your
And
life.
never got out of that room.
You
right?
don't, you know, you don't leave the room. And this would, it sounds weird to us today, but for a 14th century woman who had like you had no options in life other than you can have a lot of babies and probably be very poor, Julian had this, you know, this spiritual awakening and these amazing visions, and chose, like, this is what I want to do. I want to go into this room and I just want to pray. Within that room, she wrote these writings that have lasted for centuries and have inspired people for centuries from this little room. And when I read that biography that I showed you, Amy Frankham's biography, she has this one quote that really, really, really struck me, and I wanted to read it to you because in some ways she did the opposite of what we were doing. She's like, this is the opposite of a pilgrimage. Like, she went into a room and never moved, you know, like that is like nothing like a pilgrimage. But this is what Amy Frankham wrote about her. The frontier for which the younger Julian had longed, that place beyond the church, beyond the already known boundaries of space and time, she had now walked for many years in this little room, and she hadn't reached its end. Each moment of discovered truth opened up yet another unexpected horizon, and she now knew that beyond this moment was one more, still more immense, still greater and more surprising. Her small room, this small table, this tiny hazelnut, they all contained vast universes of revelation. From one showing, think of Lilius and the beholding, you know, for Lilius. Julian had the showings, you know, her moments of vision. From one showing came hundreds of hours of thought, prayer, hope, and love. Truth was a vast country that must be entered, explored, experienced, and finally loved. Somehow, right here in these earthen walls, the entire landscape of God spread out in front of her, a free enclosure. So there she was, Julian, one of my companions on the Camino, teaching me about a vast landscape of prayer that I had never experienced before. I had not had the space, time, physical space internally, and showing me that prayer was not just a conversation or a set of words experienced with God, or not even just being silent, because there was a lot of silence as well. But prayer is a doorway into a space. And just beyond that door is, it's like an inner Narnia. And God is waiting with his hand out saying, let's go on an adventure. Wait till you see what I'm going to show you today. I never thought about prayer that way, ever. And Julian Lily opened that up to me, this idea of prayer as itself a pilgrimage. And I was just so happy this morning that we read George Herbert's poem about prayer, because this is what I also had Herbert on my phone. He's one of my companions. Prayer is the heart in pilgrimage. It's exactly what Julian was talking about. The heart in pilgrimage. You don't have to go to Spain. It helps. You don't have to go to Spain and walk 500 miles to be able to explore that vast, wild and far place. That walk with God is itself a vast pilgrimage. So that was the Meseta, and this might be a good time to talk about our song. What do you think?
I feel like you should talk about this poem first.
Okay, talk about the poem first, and then.
So one of the things I love about the Camino is there's graffiti everywhere, which initially was sort of irritating, but then slowly you begin to realize that it's not just graffiti like a gang tagging a wall. It's actually this conversation that's happening over time where pilgrims are leaving messages for you. And then you will be tempted to graffiti on your own, which I don't think I ever did, but next time I will. So anyway, this is one of the ones we came upon that I just thought was really appropriate for this period of what Jennifer's talking about. And it says, "Last night as I lay sleeping, I dreamt, marvelous error, that I had a beehive here inside my heart, and the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures." By Antonio, what does that say? Machado, Spanish poet. And this kind of thing is so common for somebody just to leave some thought for you as you're walking. Really beautiful.
That's what most of it looks like.
Yeah.
This is what you're facing every day. You go ahead and talk.
Yeah, so like this Words of the Prophets section, this is just kind of what I'm talking about. It occurred to me this morning that the Camino is very much time travel, in that you're walking, you're traveling, and you're in constant conversation with literal thousands of years worth of pilgrims, in the way that they have structured the landscape and shaped the landscape and built things and then left these words for you. And what I mean is this. I don't know if you can tell up there, but that rock says, there will be peace when you are done. And somebody took the time to write that with a Sharpie on that rock and put it on the milestone for you to find. The road is my job. The bag is my home. The pilgrims are my family. Taryn and Alex. Jesus, it's the truth. You will find this particular script everywhere, which I thought was fascinating. But what's funny too is that whoever was writing this, like, you really recognize a script after a while. They just kept tagging things with Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And somebody with a very similar script kept tagging it with Michael Jackson. and the whole time I'm thinking, like, is Michael Jackson and Jesus the same guy? And then eventually, somewhere near the end, somebody had finally made the joke, and it said, Michael Jackson is Jesus. Which, to be clear, he is not. But it was funny. We are human beings, not human doings. And I should have taken better pictures, but this is in like a stone beehive, sort of monk's house out in the plain somewhere. And every single inch of the interior was written on with messages, which is lovely. 616 kilometers to Santiago. That's a long way to go. Viva Cristo Rey. Anybody know what that means?
Live Christ the King.
Long live Christ the King. Yeah, love it. Becoming a pilgrim, Zen master. Can I walk any slower? Yes, I can. Keep going, mate. Pappy Fox believes in you. Thanks, Pappy. Depending on how your day is going, that could be a big boost. Maya walked 48 kilometers yesterday. Don't be stupid like her. Take your time. Use the way markers to lead you to Santiago, but use the lessons learned to find the way. So anyway, that's just a little bit of the trip on the Meseta. And it is beautiful in its own way, but it's also arid, dry, sunburn, and just flat, straight walking.
No shade.
Yeah. And so then it ends with
that. So this is like that. The getting close to the turn of Act 2 into Act 3. The climax of Act 2, the end of the Meseta, is the Cruz de Ferro. And so Pete told you about that yesterday, the cross where on the hill where all it's a traditional thing to come and bring something from home or bring a rock that you're laying down at the cross. I wrote about this in my book, and so I want to read this little short piece that is kind of my angle on what Pete experienced. And I have the wrong thing on my screen. We didn't talk a whole lot about the parables of the cross. This is what Megan made a beautiful book for you, and I have it up here. The parables of the cross. She's showing all these, the seeds and the flowers. The theme is death into life, yielding, sacrificing, but more in the sense of not like this ascetic thing, but more like Abraham being ready to sacrifice his son on the altar, and then God, giving him back his son. So this whole theme of yielding and death into life was suffused through parables of the cross. And she's continually talking about that the red in things, the red in the seeds, and the red in the acorn, the red in a sunset. This color red, she calls it the crimson touch. And if you hear, you might hear an echo of the touch of red if you're a MacDonald reader, the crimson touch. So this is in the chapter Crimson. So sorry. In the spring of 2022, my husband Pete and I walked the Camino de Santiago. I'm going to skip over the details because we've already gone through that. Pete carried a second shell belonging to our dear friend and Pastor Thomas, who had unexpectedly died right before he left for his own Camino a few months before. We were shattered, destabilized. The ground beneath our feet had shifted as a couple. If anything in our life together had ever borne the crimson touch of death and resurrection, it was this journey. We decided to begin our long walk listening to On the Road with St. Augustine by James K.A. Smith, and immediately I felt a kind of personal benediction in Smith's words, for he was describing exactly why I had always, despite not being a typical history buff, grasped tightly to the hands of Christians from the past. One of the reasons, Smith writes, I found Augustine a comforting companion on the way is that he is honest about how hard the road is, even once you know where home is. I remembered my dying friend in graduate school reading Augustine's words in anticipation of meeting him face to face. There are friendships to be found across time, fellow travelers who have already walked the way before us, and they call over their shoulders to us, Ultrea et Susea, the ancient pilgrim greeting, onward and upward, keep going, you got this. I had brought my own kindred spirits with me, their books downloaded onto my Kindle to reread in the evening hours when we rested at hostels. George MacDonald's Unspoken Sermons, Julian of Norwich's Revelations of Divine Love, and Lilias Trotter's Parables of the Cross. I had found quotes from Julian in Lily's diaries, and so I knew she wouldn't mind keeping company with the medieval saint. I honestly believe that these three wise writers will be inseparable friends in the new creation, roaming the mountains of the Lord together in search of grand beauty and homey comfort. The storyteller, the anchoress, and the missionary, who had each spent their lives exploring in their own ways the vast landscape of love. From Saint Jean-Pied-de-Port, we crossed over Pyrenees Mountains and continued for several hundred miles across the valleys and vineyards of northern Spain on our way to Santiago. And about 2/3 of the way there, at exactly the point when our feet felt like they could go no further, we reached the Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross. By this time, we had seen immense beauty, vistas so spectacular that my cramped heart expanded to fill the space. Our souls need room for gladness, MacDonald wrote. I'd suffered through blisters and excruciating shin splints, face planted, top heavy with the weight of my backpack into the dirt, stumbled back onto my feet again and again. We'd walked 15 miles to one long-watched, longed-for town on the horizon, only to find, like Joseph and Mary, that there was no room in the inn, in any of the inns, and then walked 3 more miles to find an available bunk bed to which our exhausted body could collapse and sleep the sleep of death. We'd experienced the grace of hospitality and tasted the sweetness of community around the humblest of tables. And now the cross towered above us on a tall wooden pole atop an ever-growing mound of rocks. You know about the rocks. I'm going to skip over that part. Pete hung Thomas's scallop shell on the pole amidst the rosaries and the photos of loved ones and the scribbled prayers. A pilgrim gone ahead of us, looking over his shoulder, Ultrea. I carried 3 stones, which had surprisingly survived in the corner of my pack for 300 miles. As proud as we were for having pared our packing list down to the barest essentials, after only a few days of living out of our backpacks, we had begun throwing things away. That shrinking pack became for me a sweaty metaphor of spiritual freedom, the inner lightness I felt as one by one I sacrificed items I had thought were so necessary when I left home. Even long after my pack was an acceptable weight, I kept feeling an almost obsessive need to relinquish, yield, loosen my grip on the things holding me back, both physically and emotionally, shed them like dead skin. Do I really need that extra pair of socks? Why have I carried this grudge for so long? This envy, this desperation to please? Have faith, Lilia said, like the flowers, to let the old things go. But the 3 little stones I kept. I'd even given them names. All 3 were parts of myself that I needed to lay down. Like pebbles in my shoe, they had left me lame and stumbling, and now they could rest, ground by grace into new earth on the opposite side of the Atlantic. Once the plant has let go of its grasp on the old leaves, Lily wrote in Parables of the Cross, it is the work of the wind to sweep them away. And now the green shoot can grow, for the whole life of the plant is flowing into it, as the life of Jesus flows into us, forming each of us into the unique, flourishing bloom that God made us to be. Its bright petals bursting out of the sharp thorns in a blaze of fragrant golden glory. Someone asked me after I returned, why did you need to go all the way to Spain? What did a literal pilgrimage give you that you couldn't find at home? Nothing, in a sense. Nothing more than what the seeds and acorns and flowers had given to Lily. It has come as no mere far-fetched imagery, she wrote at the beginning, as if fending off a similar question, but as one of the many voices in which God speaks, bringing strength and gladness from his holy place. The answer lies in our deeply human response to metaphor. The Bible is soaked in poetry and story, in bronze snakes on poles and dirty sandals and Ebenezer stones. Jesus told parables and used the stuff of earth to embody and remind us of eternal realities our mind can't fully grasp. Water, bread, wine. Lily painted her parable. I walked mine. She had imagined the cross standing between herself and the things in her that needed to die. So had I, and now I could also imagine an ocean. As we left the Cruz de Ferro behind us and crested another hill, I remembered the words MacDonald's story had whispered to 13-year-old Lily's heart. Look up, my darling. See the heavens and the earth. I had grieved for those I'd lost. I'd feasted like the first guests at Broadlands so long ago on the kind words of kindred strangers. I had laid my burdens down. Before me, a green and golden carpet unfurled to reveal a new chapter of blisters and blessings ahead. And further still, just beyond sight, lay the sea. Let the glory of his gladness shine out, Lily had written. I lifted my head and stepped out into the wind. I know everybody's hot and we're getting to the end, so let's go really quickly through
Yeah.
Act 3 because I think that this
Yep.
is
Yeah,
pretty
so
big.
Act 3 then begins with the resolution after the dark night of the soul, and this is the descent into Galicia.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Galicia?
It's just this beautiful, verdant, green part of Spain. Lots of octopus restaurants. Yeah. You're getting back into civilization. There's lots of pilgrims surrounding you. The challenge of the body is behind you. The mental challenge is behind you. This is the challenge of the spirit when you're just putting together all of the pieces of what you've experienced, what you've learned. You're starting to anticipate, oh my goodness, it's almost done.
My
I'm gonna
body
have to go
finally
home.
enjoys
I'm
this.
finally
and it's
enjoying
almost
it. I don't
over.
want to stop walking now. and now I'm gonna have to go home, and so it's like the challenge of what am I gonna take with me? How am I going to take this?
Yeah.
And
It's hard
so
to see in
let's-
this picture, but that is down here. Like, these are castles. Look at
Yeah.
something out of Narnia. It's just absolutely magical. So Galicia is just a verdant landscape after the desert of the Meseta and the arid and the open land is now close and full of greenery and civilization and ancient things, which is just glorious. Foxgloves everywhere. These paths through ancient woods. Just gorgeous, gorgeous things.
Yeah.
So an important part about the Camino, I think, is this combination of solitude and community. You spend so much time alone, and you spend so much time with other people, and it's so unique. Like every night, you're eating around a table full of other people. You're encountering people from all over the world, and then you're also spending so much time with your own thoughts, and it's a really healthy thing. But that means that there's just such a cast of characters. Like there's people that you meet and you walk with and you see over and over again. In particular, this couple right here, he's Canadian, she's Spanish, and I think they were newly married and walking the Camino. And we kept bumping into them and having meals with them. And then you'll lose somebody for a while. And then 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, there he is again. I know that guy, which is really fun. This is Lori and Russell, the blind couple, out on their second Camino. These are canvassers. Yeah, some good friends that we linked up with.
That was Susie took it.
Yeah, yeah. You will eat many fine meals. This is a paella, just cooked in an albergue, and this pan is, I think, probably at least 4 feet across. It's giant, and it fed a whole table of people. Just glorious stuff. This is fun. This Korean couple, we met the first day we were in Spain or in France. And they spoke no English. We spoke no Korean. All we could say was "안녕하세요" to each other when we met. But they were really friendly, and we really liked seeing them. And then we lost them for the whole Camino. And then miraculously, on the train back to the airport, we were in the same car. And we were like, "Hey, we all made it!" And, really adorable.
Like a novel. We have these recurring.
This is a convent we stayed at that was full of singing nuns. It was really lovely. They invited anybody who wanted to come to their kind of, I don't know, what do they call it? It wasn't a Bible study, but it was kind of a meditation time. All the nuns were there, and they wanted to hear where everybody was from, a little bit about their story. And then shockingly, they were like, okay, now we're going to do some music, and we want everybody to sing something from their own culture. Pete and Jennifer, go. And I was like,
we don't sing, but the two of us had to sing a duet.
Yeah.
For the first and last time ever.
It was really funny. But then it went around, and we heard like Ukrainian music and Irish music and Spanish music, and everybody sang something from their own culture.
Why did you say it?
I can't. It was what was it? Amazing Grace. That's what it was. Yeah.
No, we have another song that will.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Are you gonna sing for us?
We will sing something. Yeah.
But
But then when we were finished with all that, the nuns were like, "Well, sister so and so is actually a songwriter, and we've written something for you." And she got out her guitar and they played for us. And as they played, this woman who's standing, she came around and blessed every one of us with oil on the forehead, and just absolutely lovely. And it's remarkable to feel that kind of hospitality and care. It's really something. And then the other companion all the way along is Saint James. He's the patron saint of Spain, and you will come across these statues of him walking the landscape. And over the course of hundreds of miles, like when that statue shows up, you're like, "Hey, Jimmy, like, keep going, man. We're almost there." It feels like a personal connection that you've got to this person that just walks right out of history. Really remarkable. This was the top of a mountain. We just entered this kind of magical wood where all of a sudden everything had a face. Every tree had little faces painted on them, and I was like, "What is happening?" And then we hear the floating out of the air is the theme song to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Does anybody know what this song is?
Where's Ken?
Yeah.
Like this old Western song. So that's just floating. I'm like, what is going on? And we come around the bend, and there's this just old Spanish guy sitting on a log, And he's got strawberries out and coffee, and he's like, "You guys need anything? Have some strawberries, have some coffee." And as we're taking advantage of his kindness, he starts saying, "So you're American, yeah?" "Yeah, we are American." You like westerns?" Like, "Yes, we do." "You like John Wayne?" "John Wayne." And he starts talking about all of his favorite westerns, and then I remember in particular, he loved Clint Eastwood, and he said, "Oh, you like Dirty Harry?" "Yeah, yeah, Dirty Harry." "Go ahead, make happy my day." And he just loved it. He was hysterical. He was just so funny. And that kind of interaction happened over and over. Just unexpected hospitality where you're in the middle of nowhere, you're thirsty, you're hungry, you don't know how far you have to go, and then out of the mist comes somebody with something for you to drink.
And he was an artist, and he had
And he was
surrounded us-
artist,
He had
and-
surrounded us with happy faces.
Yeah. Another thing that really jumped out at me a lot was the road is strewn with ruins of old monasteries and old churches that have fallen into disrepair. And I couldn't help but think about resurrection and how it felt like I was in some ways wandering across like the bones of a piece of the church that had passed. And on the one hand, that's really sad. You know, we think a lot in the West, we think a lot about how the European church is dying, which for the record, I don't think is true. But pieces of it have died, and you see them evidenced in these ruined cathedrals along the way. And it just gave me a lot of time to think that, like, you know, what if the new creation and the resurrection is not only about our bodies, but about this ruin? You know, maybe this church has an unlooked for purpose yet in store on the day of the resurrection and the new creation. Really beautiful to think about. So this is Emmaus. Do you want to talk about Emmaus?
Yeah, for the sake of time and heat, I'll cut this short. This is the last of our little stories, but
Sort
of. You have an ending, yeah. But we told you about like just the sense of community and hospitality the whole way through was just such an enormous part of this for us. And there was one particular town. We were exhausted. We came into the town. We were sitting in a cafe, and we had our packs out. We knew that the hostel, the albergue, didn't open for a couple hours. And two people came up to us and said, "Are you pilgrims? Are you pilgrims?" And we said, "Yes." And they said, "We own the albergue. Can we take your packs from you, and you can just be free for a while to walk around?" And I said, "Sure." And they made it a point to go out into the city to find the pilgrims, anybody who needed space, and say, we'll take your burden from you for a while, you rest, and then when you're ready, come and find a bed." And it was just like, it was such a beautiful experience. That the whole evening was beautiful. Their hospitality, it was a transcendent kind of experience for me.
And it wasn't just an albergue, it was part of a church.
It was a part of a church. But this, to use Lilius's term, linked with something that I had been listening to and God had been speaking to me the whole way, from both Lily and from McDonald and especially from Julian at that point. And also from Kate to Camillo, but I'm going to skip that part. You can ask me later. There's a very important Kate to Camillo piece to this story. Another of my companions, about the hospitality of God and God's love. And if you've read George Herbert's poem, "Love Bade Me Welcome," you know, that sense, so many times that we were experiencing that kind of welcome in a way that we never had before. And Julian's Revelations of Divine Loves talks about the homeliness of Christ. The homely, as in the last homely house of Elrond, you know, the homeliest, coziest, intimate place you can imagine. You know, not this grand thing where you feel out of place, but it's like coming into a place where you're at home and somebody's saying, "Let me take your burdens from you. Come and have a seat, and I will bring you food." And she's like, that's who Christ is. Christ is the host of the feast, and Christ is the servant of the feast. It is the homeliest place you can imagine. And so one of the most, to me, beautiful moments of the entire Camino was we were walking up this really steep hill. Everybody's exhausted, just completely exhausted. And you crest the top of the hill, and this is what you see. And it's just,
it says self-service Enjoy.
And it's it's hard to explain what this means to you when you've walked so far and you're so tired and out in the middle of nowhere, literally nowhere, on the top of the crest of a little mountain, you have a feast spread in front of you, just created by strangers. It's not fancy. It's on a little table. It's just made of nuts and fruit, and that was the most beautiful spread of food I ever seen.
And it's free.
And it's free.
You can leave a donation if you choose.
And it was like the closest I think I've ever come to feeling like I had come to the supper of the Lamb, the wedding feast of the Lamb. After this whole journey, this was at post Christofero. It was after all that, and coming to the homely love of Christ, and His humble, beautiful feast that He's laid for us. And so that to me was like, that was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Of the journey.
So then I'm going to speed through some of this. That's a blessing that we were given at an albergue, which is just really beautiful. As you proceed, as you get closer and closer to Santiago, the end of the trail, people begin to cast off their shoes because the shoes are tired and worn out and they're causing the blisters, and you just begin to see shoes everywhere. It's remarkable. I assume this means there's barefooted people out there too, but I'm not sure how that works. And then, there's our tired feet as we have finally arrived in the cathedral square of Santiago. And then this is Eddie, who gave me my tattoo. I went out of the way to find a tattoo artist there in Santiago that would do what I needed. He was great. So then, Santiago is it really feels like the culmination of so much stuff. It's just an incredibly joyful experience to walk into that square and know how many people have been there before you. But then also, like a story, there's this denouement. Like after the final conflict is over and resolved, there's this final sort of off-ramp to the story. And that comes in the form of the extra 40 or 50 miles that you can walk to get to the coast of Finisterre, which is mile 0, which is after you've seen that number be much higher than 0, it's really satisfying to see it finally reach 0. And
I made it. We are at the tip of Cape Finisterre, which is Latin. Finisterre means the end of the world. And anyway, we walked nearly 500 miles to get here. Started in France, all the way across Spain. Whew. My legs are tired. So 2 fun little stories about this spot on Earth. One, Roman legionnaires, they say used to retire here at the end of their career because it was as close as you could get to the sunset in the known world. And beyond the sunset lay Elysium. And that's pretty awesome. And that also makes it sound a lot like the Grey Havens, if you're a Tolkien fan, like I am. And then the second cool story is that this is traditionally where St. James arrived for his ministry in Spain to preach to the Druids and the Celtics, which means that St. James literally saw his best friend raised from the dead, and he went to the end of the world to tell everybody about it, which is pretty awesome. And I love that because he did that. Spain is their patron saint is St. James, and we are here today literally because he succeeded in his mission before he returned to Jerusalem and was killed for what he believed. Anyway, I am glad to be here today. I'm glad it's over. We'll be home in a few days, and look forward to seeing everybody.
We are done. No more walking.
Well, there is a whole lot more to this story, but we don't have time for everything. How could you? Happy to answer any questions you guys have.
How long was the trip?
I'm sorry?
How long was it?
How much time?
Yeah.
We took 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Most people do it in about 33 days. Like guidebooks are frequently broken into very walkable chunks that let you do it in 33 days. I do not recommend that. As we talked about, we ended up off the guidebook path, and that was the best choice. So if I did it again, or if anybody asks me how to do it, I just say, just go and make it up as you go along. That's the way to encounter it.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. You don't need a guidebook. You follow the arrows.
6 weeks is about 40 days, which is also a holy number.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one final, I guess, story is we walked to Finisterre, and then we went back. We got on a bus, went back to Santiago, and didn't plan it this way, but we got back for Pentecost Sunday, and went to Mass at the cathedral for Pentecost, which is when they bring out this massive censer. It's called the Boda Fumiero, and it's this giant thing that's gushing incense, and the monks hoist it up into the air, and it swings through the whole transept, you know. And funnily, is that word?
Funnily?
It's a funny story, but the reason that they do that is because traditionally the cathedral is full of so many stinky pilgrims that they're trying to cover it up. But that happened on Pentecost Sunday, and then we had the pleasure of seeing the Pentecost Mass, which of course, you know, Pentecost is when Peter preached to the masses, and the Spirit came down, and the tongues were, you know, it was preached in all the tongues. And so in this Mass, like, they read the scripture readings in multiple languages, and various parts of it were in different languages. And it was literally the bishop preaching to all the cultures of the world. Like, it was so many people, thousands of people from everywhere in every language. And it was such a Pentecostal moment. And sorry to the Catholics, Cecilia, but when it came time for communion, you know, he said, you know, if you're Catholic, come on down for communion. And I was just like, nope. I'm sorry. You and Jesus can fight it out later, but I'm taking communion this morning. You know, it should be that way. But it was a beautiful, beautiful experience, and a great way to culminate the whole thing in Pentecost. So, yeah. Oh yeah. So as you walk, you have this passport, and every place you stay will have a passport stamp for a pilgrim. And to officially complete the Camino, you have to have at least one stamp per day for the last 100 kilometers. So obviously you can get a lot more than that. We've just got it chock full. And people like to get creative and offer super special stamps to get you to come to their albergue. But it's a really good souvenir of the whole trip. Yeah, fantastic.
And we made up our own song.
Oh, that's right.
Sing us your song.
Let me see.
We it's a lot of walking, and you get very bored, and so I'm just gonna put this back.
Yeah.
So does anybody ever sing that song when you're a kid about, like, there's a hole in the bottom of the sea?
Yeah.
And then everything adds a different thing. So we had the idea that, well, every day we're going to add something we've seen to the song. And I am not going to sing you all 40 verses. But just as a little sample, like the way that it worked was, there's a whole lot of pilgrims on the road. There's a whole lot of pilgrims on the road.
We cannot sing together because he sings at a different.
Go. You do it.
There's a whole lot of pilgrims on the road.
There's a whole lot of pilgrims on the road. There's a whole lot of pilgrims. There's a whole lot of pilgrims. There's a whole lot of pilgrims on the road. There's a slug on a fence and a whole lot of pilgrims on the road. There's a slug on a fence and a whole lot of pilgrims on the road. There's a slug on a fence. There's a slug on a fence. There's a slug on a fence and a whole lot of pilgrims on the road.
There's a
Horse in the mist and a slug on a fence.
Let's do it. Let's do a couple. Okay.
So then if you
we memorized
little
these.
sample.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would sing it over and over again as we walked to stave off boredom and try to memorize the whole thing. So by the time we get to the end, oh my gosh.
It's too many. We will not sing the whole thing. I'm just going to read them to you.
There's a portal in the trees, and a piper in the woods, and a town is a lie, an apocalyptic donkey.
The town is a lie. Apocalyptic donkey.
Apocalyptic donkey smells like cows, and an octopus with lips. Up a long, long way, and a Templar castle. Drop a rock at the cross. Druids on the mountain. Free fruit feast. Tapas and Leon. 200 miles. And a nun with a guitar and a field full of the Meseta. Anyway, there's lots of strange things.
Oh, that's our best souvenir from the trip.
Yeah. I cannot do it by memory.
Thank you guys for your patience.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah,
really,
you bet.
It's really cool and
Yeah,
beautiful.
I hope that didn't feel like vacation photos. That's not our intent. It really is. It's a profound experience that I encourage anybody to undertake if you're able.
Yeah.
And it'll work on you. Yeah.
If you're interested, Pete kept our Instagram account. It's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of a hilarious journal of our trip. It's called Pilgrim Souls, SOLES.
Oh.
And you have basically the entire
Lots of videos
lots
and
of videos,
comments
lots
and
of
pictures.
so you can follow the whole story.
Yeah.
That's awesome,
Guys.
Handing it back to Kirsten.